Good. Okay. So, dear Rector Stoffel, dear Vice Rectors of the Universities of Zurich, Geneva, and Neuchâtel, dear colleagues, dear students, I'm Balthasar Bickel, and as the Director of the NCCR Evolving Language, I'd like to welcome you to the launch of our Phase 2 research program. We thought that the launch of this new phase is a good opportunity to tell a little bit about what this NCCR is all about, and especially so because we are very happy that we're able to expand the foundations we have in Switzerland with the University of Neuchâtel joining us as a third home institution. So in the next 25-30 minutes, co-directors Nina Kazanina and Klaus Zuberbühler and myself will give you a quick tour through the NCCR, tell you a little bit about the research we are doing and what this is about, and then we'll hand over to the representatives of the three home institutions to say a few words on their side. Our enterprise started with the observation that the arguably most distinctive feature of our species, language, is currently facing enormous and unprecedented challenges in all of its core functions. So one function of language is clearly communication, and here we face the challenges that come up with artificial intelligence, for example, ChatGPT surrounding us and intervening in our conversations. Another core function of language is thinking, and here we face the challenge that it is becoming increasingly possible with neurotechnology to probe what someone has in their mind before saying even a single syllable. A third core function of language is that it is a means of tagging social identities and ethnic groups. And here we are facing the challenge with increasing globalization. The diversity of languages in the world is rapidly declining. We feel that we are not well prepared to face these challenges. We don't fully understand their consequences and their conditions. And we thought that maybe it's time to approach the problem of language in a radically different way than it's usually done. How? It's actually quite simple. We start from the simple premise that language is first and foremost just a biological fact. But once you say this, we have to say with Dobzhansky that it really does not make sense unless studied in the light of evolution. So the premise of our research enterprise is to approach language from a radically evolutionary perspective, that is, trying to understand why language is the way it is as something that has evolved in our lineage from other precursors in communication and cognition across the animal kingdom, and how it continues to evolve vis-a-vis the challenges that I mentioned before. Now, taking an evolutionary perspective is not exactly novel. In fact, it has its roots in the 19th century with Schleicher in linguistics and Darwin in biology, developing this idea of evolution and the thinking in terms of trees and phylogenetic developments. So we built directly on this tradition, but we obviously have novel technologies and new methods at our disposal that were not even thinkable at the time. We can do comparative behavioral experiments across species, for example, with eye tracking. We have computational power to fit computational and statistical models at an unprecedented scale. We have high-resolution imaging, both in space and time, in the brain processes that observe language. And we have multimodal recordings of linguistic behavior all around the world. But it's not just new tools and technologies that we have, it's also new ways of approaching the problem of language that we have and that we took as a basis for developing our research program. Most importantly, we realized that language needs to be understood from three different angles that are all evolutionary in their own kind. First and foremost, we have to look at it in terms of biological evolution. That is, the processes that led our species and not others to develop this faculty that we have. But that's not all. We also have to look at how languages in the plural keep changing over time and in their own mode of evolution, that is linguistic evolution. That is the dynamic of this phenomenon. And finally, we have to look at how language evolves in the face of technological evolution. I mentioned neurotechnology as the latest newcomer, so to speak, but obviously it happened earlier, for example, with the invention of writing as a novel technology long ago. Now, in order to attack the problem with all these different angles, we need expertise from many different fields, and this NCCR really integrates disciplines of a great variety. And I'm happy to say that in the last 4 years, we were able to increase the collaboration between disciplines, and here this plot simply shows how it grew in terms of publications that involved people from different disciplines. And I'm sure in the next 4 years it will grow even more and also fill the gaps where still we haven't had joint publications so far. Also, we are not doing this alone. We are embedded in a worldwide network of researchers and research stations, collaborations, where we look at animal behavior or at human behavior, linguistic behavior, language acquisition, and language processing with partners all over the world, as shown on this map. So what is the phase 2 program really about? It's really complex web of little tasks and projects that all belong together. And I will not walk you through the details here, but instead what my colleagues and I want to do in what follows is to give you a high-level tour through the main projects. That is the 5 core projects that we have here: diversification, acquisition, syntax, meaning, and interaction. I will start with the project on diversification and then hand over to my colleagues for the others. The project on diversification is really concerned with this phenomenon of language being a highly dynamic phenotype. That is, language is subject to relentless change over time and space, but the question is, how can we capture this dynamic? How can we describe it? How can we model it? And how can we compare it then to other species and potential precursors in other species? And what is the adaptive function of such a highly dynamic system? It's quite puzzling. It costs a lot of energy to always learn new languages, yet we do it. Why? What's the function? And third, how was it possible? What made it possible that we developed such a highly dynamic communication system? We approach these questions with 3 work packages. One is focused on capturing the phenotype, so to speak. Phylogenetic modeling in both our center and worldwide has increasingly driven home the point that language operates in a bounded space of states, which languages cycle through in a stationary dynamic. This is well understood how we can model this these days. But the problem is that it's based on data from the current distribution of languages, which got heavily distorted in the past 10,000 years to spreads of individual language families in the Neolithic. How can we probe beyond this? This is what we are currently looking into in our research projects. And then the other big challenge is are there any comparable system in other animals? There are in few individual studies that suggest that chimpanzees, for instance, also have diversification processes, but how far this goes, how deep it goes, is not well understood. The second work package in this project focuses on the functions of this dynamic, and anthropologists and linguists have agreed since long that the main function is social tagging, marking social and ethnic group differences. But which features are involved? There is evidence from recent work in our consortium that this differs across different aspects of language, how far this is used. And when you talk about social differentiation, you also talk about within-group normalization, because you need to have norms within groups in order to signal differences. So the question is, how get these norms transmitted? And one of our tasks is to look into, for example, storytelling as a means of establishing and keeping and transmitting these norms. And this brings then the inevitable question of whether there are sort of proto-normative roots in other animals. And I've just flagged here this almost anecdotal evidence from a group of chimpanzees using straws in the ear as, I don't know, fashion, group signature. We don't know. This is one of the big challenges that we are going to face in this phase 2. The third work package here focuses on the conditions. What has made it possible for us to change language? This is quite a unique and special gift we have as humans. What neural mechanisms support this? How exactly does it work when brains interact with each other so that we create new forms? Completely ill understood so far. What drives individual differences of this? Not everybody creates novelty all the time at the same rate. What are the differences behind that? We suspect it is related to differences in language aptitude across a large range of measures. And finally, once we understand this variability, can we exploit it, and to what extent can we use it clinically for applications, for instance, for restoring language functions after a stroke, after language loss through neurostimulation. And with this, I hand over to my colleague Klaus Zuberbühler in Neuchâtel, who will talk about the acquisition project.
Okay, hello everyone. Thank you all for coming. It's a great honor to stand here, and I want to first, before I start, really thank our rectorat for supporting us. We're extremely happy that Neuchâtel is now a full member of this NCCR. And so my job is to talk you through 2 of the 5 projects that we have planned. So if I could have the next slide, please. Thanks. So that's the first one is on acquisition. So language in humans has to be learned, obviously. But really what we're interested in is sort of what are the broader underlying patterns that have evolved here. So we see communication or the emergence of communication, like any ontogenetic thing, as something that is in interaction between the internal, what's an individual brings with it, and the environment. So it's always these 2 things that play together. And there's 2 things we're interested in particular. One is production, sort of how are the various communication patterns learned by young individuals, A, and B, in humans specifically, why are there individual differences? We all know that people differ in their linguistic skills. Why is that the case? And can we possibly intervene early on to correct eventual things? So next, please. So just something we found in phase 1 that to show you how we've addressed this problem. So one thing is, for example, that humans tend to address their infants. So there's this infant-directed communication behavior that's quite common. And so that's always been seen as a driving force of learning. So we did a comparison and looked at our closest relatives to non-human gray apes. And you can see now in the top graph this drastic difference in how much of a role this plays. So humans are very, very directed at their infants when they communicate. Gray ape mothers do it, but much, much less so. And that's possibly already points to a fundamental difference you would like to explore more. Next. So vocal learning is obviously key here, right? That's sort of the summary term. But traditionally people have said this is a vocal learner and that one's not. But we really would like to see this more as a sort of a continuum. And this can evolve across the phylogenetic spectrum. It's not something that sort of moves along the species. And so what seems to play a role is social stuff. So for example, turn taking, feedback, ostensive signaling, all these things seem to be part of the picture. And what we want to do here is a broad scale comparison across species to understand these sort of social factors that play a role. Next. Now, in terms of individual differences, also some work from phase 1. So here, one of the surprising findings was that, video game playing can actually be something good. And so here is one study that has devised a video game that has measurable positive impact on children's reading and linguistic skills after on even long term. So this is worth following up clearly. And so the question is sort of what's the nature of the intervention that really makes this work? Has it to do with executive function, or is it directly to do with linguistic skills themselves? Next, please. So here generally we're interested in you know, what explains, what predicts the variability that we see in our children, what's environmental, what's neural, what's genetic, and how can we assess this in a good way, and obviously how can we intervene. And you can see the societal relevance of all this, because worldwide, we're moving into multilingual societies. It happens, you know, in our neighborhoods everywhere. So children grow up increasingly multilingually. So this needs to be understood and dealt with. Next. So the second project that I'm going to present is what we call interaction. So this is really based on this idea that what really is at the core of human language is evolution in terms of social cognition. So social cognition drove and pushed our ancestors from a sort of primate-like communication system into language. And so that's our basic hypothesis, and we're interested in the neural substrates that play a role here, and obviously also the evolutionary forces that have caused this. Next. So just a couple of, so there's 2 work packages here, a couple of tasks that we have given ourselves. So one is really to go broad scale across the phylogenetic tree, ideally find species that are closely related to each other, but differ in these key features that we're interested in. And one candidate that we will have our eyes on is cooperation, cooperative breeding, any kind of cooperative behavior that may have enhanced communication skills in a species. We're going to try and do this as widely as we can. We'd like to find a metric that we can apply across species, borrowing from ideas from information theory. Next. So then related to that is to try and model evolution. So game theory has been a great friend in understanding how the patterns, the forces of evolution, it comes down to economics in the end. And so the idea here is to develop ecologically valid games that go beyond what's been done until now, make it a lot more real, and then go out and test things like interdependence, reputation, communication, how all that impacts on cooperation. Next. Then also a part of this work package is a bit of neurobiology. The amygdala is a famous center for processing social information. So here also from phase 1, some interesting results. Turns out that cooperative breeders, so animals that breed cooperatively, and domesticated animals tend to have a different type of amygdala architecture compared to other animals. Why might that be? So again, it may have been this may have been part of the puzzle so we need to look at the amygdala, how it operates, especially its role in decision making when it comes to cooperation and communication. Next. Then also perhaps a bit more at the behavioral end, you know, animal signals. So this is the second work package called integration of information. A lot of communication is multimodal, and in animals also signals tend to have not just biological functions, you know, in terms of food calls, alarm calls, and all that. So that's well established. But in addition and on top, and sometimes orthogonally, they also contain flexible meaning. So things like identity, motivation, and so on. And so here we'd like to understand what are the evolutionary trends, again, across species, to understand this interplay between fixed meanings that are given by the function and the more flexible stuff that you know, is of interest for language, of course. Next. Okay, so again, this idea that everything is multimodal. So here now the focus is on humans. And we'd like to see, really, we'd like to observe what goes on in the brain when information is integrated, when linguistic and what's called paralinguistic, so non-linguistic information in the multimodal signal is produced. How is that all integrated into one coherent process? Next. Then also very exciting, So neural oscillations have gotten a lot of attention recently because they seem to track speech in quite amazing ways. So a lot of it has been done on individuals. And now, of course, the next step is to see what exactly happens when two people communicate, when they interact with each other. Do neural oscillations also converge during a conversation? How does this happen? Can this be observed when two people interact linguistically? Next. Then also looking into the brain. So here the hippocampus is another structure that is very interesting because it also has this sort of integrative role where a multimodal information seems to be translated into verbal representation, and especially during sleep. So here again, the idea is to try and observe this process with the MEG that we got in Geneva, combined with EEG, see how word learning actually happens. And because a lot of it happens during sleep, we have a great tool here to do experiments. We can boost sleep, we can inhibit sleep, and see how that all plays out in terms of word learning. Okay, next slide. So with this, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Nina in Geneva. She's going to talk about syntax and semantics. Thank you.
Thank you. So the remaining two projects that I will present have to do with the language ability to represent a lot of new meanings and represent them very flexibly in an unrestricted way, from very rare to very frequent, from very predictable to very unpredictable, from things that you've learned and known all your life to things that are completely new, and so on. So one amazing ability that language has that allows this creativity lies within syntax. Syntax is the internal structure of linguistic expressions, and the syntax project that I'm about to present looks into the properties of this internal structure and its neural basis. So let's start with an elementary piece of language. So you see a sentence here, kids chase monkeys. You might think that what we do to create a sentence like this is to take the lexicon in our head, take three words and just chain them as if they were beads on a string, one after another, left to right. And that's very intuitive, but that's actually not how language works. Years of research from linguistics have shown that, in fact, the correct representation for the internal structure of sentences is not linear, left to right. It's hierarchical, like, for example, what this little tree is meant to represent. So in addition to the left to right direction, the tree also has the vertical direction that allows to encode various types of relations, such as sisterhood or dominance or asymmetric dominance, that in turn allows to encode relations that are important for us when we communicate, like who did what to whom, whether it's the kids who chase the monkeys or whether it's the monkeys who chase the kids, and so on and so forth. So in the syntax project, we're interested in the properties of this hierarchy, in how it's represented neurally, how it compares to hierarchies in other domains, and so on. And as a side note, hierarchy is a thing that humans like. So in the pictures here, you can see how we think about the animal kingdom in terms of its animal taxonomy. That's a type of hierarchy. In the second picture, you can see a family tree, like in genetics. It's also a type of taxonomy. Again, there is a vertical representation that allows passage, that represents generational information here. And even when we think, about the NCCR here, you've seen a large, big hierarchy earlier in the slide. And, this project here, in fact, has 3 sub-projects or 3 work packages, which each have like 3 or 4 tasks and so on. So hierarchical representation is, a big thing for humans. But going back to syntax, there are a few questions that are especially important from our perspective. So first, when you want to encode a meaning, say, for example, you want to share with a friend the fact that you've seen this lovely chimpanzee family, how does this non-verbal meaning get to be encoded into a sequence of words and the corresponding hierarchical syntactic structure. So how do you go from the non-verbal representations of thought to the sentence? In this case, the mother chimp is grooming the father with their baby beside her, for example. Second, we are interested in how hierarchical syntactic structure is linearized for speech and back. So when, as a comprehender, you get a speech signal like the one that you see here, it actually does represent the sentence on top. So you manage to unpack the linear sequence of words into, you manage to unpack this speech signal into a sequence of words and then restore the hierarchical relations within the words. How is that happening? And finally, how is this happening from the brain's perspective? At the neural level, what is the workings of the neural assemblies, oscillatory dynamics, and so on, that allows to represent all of those relations at the same time? At the moment, our neural understanding of of processing of linguistic information is down to sequences of words. So the amazing outcome of this project would be to understand how hierarchical relations beyond sequences are represented. So we're going, on the comparative side of the syntax project. At least structure and possibly hierarchy also exists in animal communication. One of the major outputs of phase 1 is the so-called vocal database that consists of vocalizations across many types of species in natural environments and so on. And this extensive, searchable, well-organized and labeled database allows us to extract sequences of calls in various species and look at the organization of individual calls within sequences. Are there irregularities of calls that are allowed or not allowed within species? And if those regularities obtain, what are the mathematical properties of the system that supports this type of regularity? How far it is from the mathematical properties of language? And then finally, going to other cognitive domains, as I've mentioned already, hierarchy is pervasive. It's pervasive in other domains like numerical cognition or spatial navigation, and it's definitely pervasive in action. Actions are organized hierarchically. When we, in this picture here, you can see an action of pouring a cup of tea. So you put the tea bag, you then, pour some water, then you maybe add some milk. Turns out that this sequence is not just linearly organized, it has some hierarchical packaging or some packaging to it. Is that type of representation comparable to language? If not, in which way is it not? And nevertheless, do they share the same type of neurocognitive architecture? Do they feed onto, are they underpinned by the same type of neural mechanisms? As a kind of another mention in the same action world would be to say that looking at action is also interesting from the evolutionary perspective. Evolution of tool making, for example, is relatively well established, and the brain changes that are accompanying each milestone of evolution of tool making are also establishable. Comparing them against comparing that neural architecture for the neural architecture of language is actually one of the tasks for the syntax project. Okay, and the final project of 5 is called meaning, and that's, for many of us, that's one of the most important functions of language, as I said, expressing and sharing and representing complex ideas. We've already seen that syntax and the hierarchical representation is a core part of it, but another core part, of course, is the lexicon, the words that you can feed into the syntactic tree that actually can be interpreted according to the syntactic laws to yield compositional meanings. So here the meaning is the kid chases the monkey. Maybe it's not such a unique meaning, but in other cases, you can think of meanings that are never have been expressed before, like the wooden trumpet is eating a pink elephant and be happily in agreement with with what it might mean. So the meaning project looks at the organization of the lexicon. And here I represent the lexicon as if it were a bag of words, but that's a completely wrong representation. In fact, it's very well known that the words within the lexicon are organized in various ways. They are organized, for example, by semantic fields. So the words that are representing the same type of meaning group together, so to speak. In the macro evolution side of the, so we're interested in the evolution of the lexicon. We're interested in it in at least two ways. First of all, we're interested in how lexicons evolve over time. So lexicons, for some reasons, lexicons don't get fixed. So it would be imaginable to think that the chair always means the same thing from generation to generation, but only very few words don't shift their meanings. How the meanings shift, what's the dynamic of that change, whether the dynamic is the same across semantic families or not, is the subject of macroevolutionary research within the meaning project. At the same time, we can also look at the evolution of the lexicon within the lifespan of a person from a person's perspective. So that might mean evolution across the lifespan of an individual in terms of their native language. So how the lexicon initially appears in children, whether the words that you learn as a child continue to play the same role across the lifespan, or whether they, the anchors kind of change. What happens when a second language is learned? So that's L2 on the slide, how it interacts with the first language and the meanings that are established through the first language lexicon. And then in cases where of the lexical loss, like stroke, post-stroke aphasia, or neurodegeneration, how can this devolved lexicon be reinforced through various, through various tools, like, say, for example, neurostimulation, or using advances from artificial intelligence. So restoring the lexicon to its fuller form from its lost form is one of the aims for the meaning project. And finally, again, on the comparative side, it's interesting to see what are the lexicons of animals are. Those are quite minimal compared to humans. And the question is why? Do they not want to express more than just be alarmed and, food? Or is it, is there an inherent limitation on the number of calls an animal species might have? Or is it something that conditioned by the environment, that the environment, and the survival goals do not require a bigger lexicon? So how expandable is the lexicon? How can the functional fixedness of animal calls be weakened? By this, it means that, unlike humans who might use the same word in many different contexts, animal calls are very fixed to their context. Can that dimension be relaxed in animals, at least through training? And on a more compositional side, animals do produce calls, but it's an old question that is still being debated. Could those calls be put together to express meanings that go beyond the individual combination or the simple combination of the two? So in phase 1, an interesting result, which is yet to be verified, is that in certain bird species, in passerines, the combination of an alert call, so be on call, be alert, and a recruitment call, so come over, yields a meaning that's a mobbing meaning. So that has some hint of compositionality to it. Can this be observed in other species? Can this be verified? For this, apes are great candidates to look at, through more lab experiments, and 3 different species of apes at Basel Zoo. So the chimps, the gorillas, and the orangutans are all going to be recruited to take part in tasks where they learn symbols. Those symbols will be put together to kind of push the compositional ability of those apes, to see whether that compositional ability exists in any measure. And with this, I think I finished my presentation, and it's a pleasure to give stage to the representatives of the 3 universities who have hosted our NCCR, over phase 1, who were at the inception and who supported the NCCR then, and who continued to support us through phase 1 and now phase 2. So thank you. The first of the three is the University of Neuchâtel and the rector of the University of Neuchâtel, Kilian Stoffel.
Thanks a lot for the chance also to give a couple of words on the name of the home institutions. Well, I have 5 minutes, so I could spend 5 minutes on welcome everyone, say thank you to everyone. I'll cut short on this part here because I would just mention the partner institutions to thank them to have accepted Neuchâtel as an equal partner in this project, which was not an easy negotiation, but we finally managed to do it. And locally, Klaus Zuberbühler to as the big leader of this overall project. So many thanks to this to Klaus and to the partner institutions. Well, how does this integrate in the strategic vision of the University of Neuchâtel? Well, it's relatively easy to see this. There are two domains where we are really doing important work in these domains. First of all, it's the cutting edge research, which was just presented now. And at the same time, we have also teaching programs which are following in the same domain. So there is a Master of Science, Master of Arts, which underlines that it's done in two faculties, a Center of Cognitive Science and the teaching, which is following this part. So teaching as well as research is an important domain in this is an important part of this domain for our institution. Now, on the next two slides, I'll just underline why maybe the negotiations were difficult and why it's difficult for Neuchâtel also to become a partner. It's, as you know, NCCRs are always requesting that the home institution show some engagement in this whole process, and they have also to deliver resources that show that this part is important. In the first phase, we simply didn't have the means to be a partner, an equal partner to Geneva and Zurich. And we had 4 years to prepare this. And now finally we managed to reach a level where we can be really an equal partner in this process. Basically, what we did is appointing people and making infrastructure available in this whole context. The first phase were 2 people that will be hired as assistant professors with, I think it's missing on this slide, a tenure track. This will make the closing the circle at the end. These are positions will be stabilized at the end of the project and stay within the University of Neuchâtel. So we already recruited one person, which is Ms. Tricky, which will start, she will start 1st of February in the domain of animal psychology. And then we have a second position, which is currently under review, which is related to cognitive psychology. This position is not hired yet, but this person is not hired yet, but will be a person that will create a post that will be a position that will be created during this phase. Then there are, this is, well, in kind, but I can tell you the in-kind contribution has a bill behind there because you have to pay the salaries of these people. So that's the first phase. The second phase, which is more a research service phase. So there are different platforms where we are participating. So there's the CIRI platform where we will contribute. So this is basically to get a network of zoos working. And then the second one is the ethology research station, which is currently in the phase to be built. So we don't know exactly how this will evolve. But again, to be a partner, the partners can count on. The money for this project is reserved, so we are sure that we can realize this project, whatever form it will take. This will be more local or more in partnerships with other universities will also be able, or zoos will also be able to do that. The next slide, please. Well, these are the next measures, which are more on the side of personal of people we were able to hire. So there's the first position of Gwendolyn, which is somewhere in this room, which is a key position in this whole project. So we're very happy that we were able to hire her. Then there are this technical support, which is equivalent of 2 full-time positions, plus a 50% position, which will work on outreach. And then, and this is, I think, in institutional terms, one of the key elements. We will make sure that after the third phase, we'll hope that there will be a third phase, of course, of this project, all this work will continue. And there is the first part, will continue to collaborate on the CIRI platform. That's the first, I think, important part. Then we will maintain this ethology research station, which will be developed and then maintained afterwards. As mentioned before, there is this already the teaching part that is important. We are now currently working on a complete program in cognitive psychology on the bachelor level, and if everything works out, also on the master level. And then there is the participation on doctoral schools, which is also a key element in this NCCR type of projects. And the missing part here in a certain sense on this slide is, of course, the 2 professors we are hiring in plus of the people we have already. They will continue their work at the end of the project. That were basically, or these are the elements we will bring to the project, and we are very happy that the National Science Foundation and the partners in Zurich and Geneva were happy with these propositions. Thank you.
No. And now we will have the Vice Rector of the University of Geneva.
Hello. Hi. So thanks a lot. I will also thank everyone, all the participants, all our partners, and all our PIs here in Geneva who do so much work. I have some perhaps too many slides. I'll try to be fast. First, one of the most significant outcomes of the NCCR output from the phase 1 is the MEG. The MEG always reminds me of this movie, The Meg. I don't know if you've seen this horror movie. So when I say the MEG, I always have this in mind. But this is a magnetoencephalography system that has been established at Campus Biotech in 2022, thanks to joint efforts by UNIG, the NCCR Evolving Language in particular, and the EPFL. And what I want to say is that today, 2 years later from the installation of this system, this is really highly used by researchers from both institutions at Campus Biotech, and this will enable and already enables the NCCR researchers from UNIG and UniZurich to investigate brain activity at a very, very high precision. Now, in the next slide, one important thing is the professorship positions that are part of the measures of phase 1. And as you can see, we have several tenure assistant professorships, one in language science, one in neural data science, and a full professorship in neuroscience of language. This is our current director, Nina Casanina. Next slide. And what will phase 2 bring? So here I don't necessarily want to repeat elements that have been already said, but I want to highlight 2 prominent objectives of the phase 2. First, the NCCR will put together this groundbreaking PhD program in evolutionary language science, unique in Europe and worldwide. And actually, after the first presentations we've had today, I would say I would happily engage into doing a PhD again. This program will really prepare a new generation of researchers that are really fit to advance the field of language science in a much more holistic way than previously, by integrating the humanities, biology, neuroscience, and at the same time making sure that they integrate also the new field and the rapidly evolving fields like artificial intelligence, digital technology, and neurofeedback, for instance. Second, one of the flagship new measures will be the development of a soft infrastructure in the form of an inter-university resource platform that will allow to search a library of behavioral tasks. And this will be beneficial to collect data across the world on language, cognitive, and affective tasks that will have been also collected in phase 2 and 3. And that's really key for the multi-site nature of the NCCR. Then we have the phase 2 structural measures. Thank you. So here we have new professorships, 3 new professorships, including successions. And we have also positions in research and service units in the transversal task force and also for the infrastructure. And next slide, please. So I wanted to highlight this the wide scope of the NCCR evolving language. I think it's really particularly important to see that we have faculties that work together. I can say at the University of Geneva, we really are a generalist university, like Neuchâtel and Zurich, but it's really important that the faculties collaborate together. And we have many PIs in the different faculties. And I highlighted also the gender distribution in violet female professors and in green male professors, just to show that we have a good diversity also here. One of the objectives that I want to salute particularly is establishing in the future also new links with the Faculty of Science, with the new structural measure of a professorship in genetics and of language. Now I have two more slides, well, three more slides, but two more on the NCCR story at the University of Geneva. I just wanted to say that in particular, because here today in this kickoff, we are the University of Geneva people are here in Campus Biotech, and this gives a little bit of perspective also on the long-term importance of the NCCRs. Here, Campus Biotech really lives also and does science thanks to several NCCR that have been active over the past, SYNAPSI, of course, for the neurosciences, and the Centre Interfacultaire in Affective Sciences, which is now the CISA. And so these are really at the heart of making Campus Biotech and neuroscience in Geneva very, very strong and very interesting. Now, this is another slide of perspective for looking back, to look in the future. We've had several NCCRs in Geneva in which we were leading or co-leading, and it always has been a story of success. And this brings me to my last slide, just to say the full support of the University of Geneva for the NCCR. For the NCCR evolving language. And this is not, the cat below is not the directorate or the institution supporting the NCCR. As I was listening to the presentations before, you spoke a lot of evolution. As a geologist, often we speak about evolution in terms of competition. And here I only heard collaboration, the collaborative aspects of language and language evolution. And in fact, I think these two cats are really showing the benefits, the fruitful, the fruits you can get from collaboration rather than competition. And the NCCR are really this. So thank you.
Thank you, Sébastien Casteltor. Now we will have the University of Zurich with the Vice Rector, Elisabeth Stark.
Can you hear me? Is the mic working?
Yes.
Okay. Brauche ich nicht. Also, muss ich klicken? There are too many slides here as well. Sorry for the interruption. Yes. Okay, so dear President Stoffel, cher Kilian, dear Vice President Research, cher Sébastien, dear Balthasar, Nina, and Klaus, dear colleagues. I'm very proud to welcome, or in the middle of the presentation, to say a few words today as Vice President Research of our university, the first historically leading house of this brilliant research enterprise. Thank you very much for inviting me today to this kickoff event and for giving me the opportunity to congratulate you on the successful start of the second phase of the NCCR Evolving Language in June already, and to also say a few words on the strategic importance this NCCR has within the landscape of research at our university. As Vice President Research, I'm responsible also for early career researches and innovation. So I'm responsible in general for overseeing the UZH internal selection process of NCCR applications, and then of course for supporting those who are successful. It is very important. NCCRs are really the cornerstones of our research strategy, as they bring about change in existing research structures across disciplines, institutes, and faculties, and they create and strengthen, as we heard, partnerships and networks among Swiss universities and abroad. So in our case, the Evolving Language, together with Geneva and Neuchâtel, even though we heard that it was hard, we are really very happy to have created this tripartite partnership. Since its start in 2020, the University of Zurich as the leading house, we created, as you have seen here, 6 new professorships. On the first slide, you see those on the faculties of Arts and Social Sciences. And you see here at the next slide those who were created at the Faculty of Sciences. So we have a broad area already of newly created professorships in areas such as digital linguistics, neuroscience, primate communication, genetics of language. These appointments, as I said, span 2 faculties, and that is already a brilliant success, so to have interdisciplinarity implemented in the domain of linguistics. At the same time, the linguistic research infrastructure, LIRI, which could rhyme with Siri, has been established after having been integrated into the Swiss Roadmap for Research Infrastructure in 2018 already. And it was recognized as a technology platform. That's an internal quality label here afterwards at UZH. LIRI provides data science and technology services for linguistic research nationwide, in theory. And having been part of the development of LIRI, I'm particularly proud of its continuous expansion to meet the needs of our community. Now, looking ahead, upcoming initiatives in phase 2 include the recruitment of 3 new professorships, as you can see here, as well as the implementation of the Institute of the Interdisciplinary Study of Language Evolution, the ILE. Positive decisions by the executive and the overseeing board of UZH have already been taken, and ILE will start officially in early 2025. And then you can see also on this slide a launch of a cross-faculty Master in Science in Evolutionary Language Science in late 25. I'm very grateful for the NCCR directors and PIs to have created this a master's program, again, across faculties. All these initiatives would not have been possible without the strong institutional commitment to advancing linguistics by the researchers and faculty members involved. And I would like to thank all of you for your hard work in driving this project forward. A special thanks to Balthasar Bickel and his group for having had the idea and really having set up such a wonderful enterprise. A big thank you has also to go out to Marus Bolfing, Head of Focus Areas and Networks, he is here, in providing support for researchers at UZH with their NCCR applications and providing a wonderful support for myself. Thank you very much. And now it is high time to wish you all the best for your efforts in the second phase of the project Evolving Language. And please rest assured that as researchers and as colleagues from Geneva and Neuchâtel, that you will have my full support in every next step. Thank you very much.
Oh, yeah. So now we will have an overview of what's coming.
So I would like to return the thanks really to the representatives of the 3 home institutions. It's really wonderful to feel this strong support, and I think it's not just cats that support, it's more powerful creatures, I feel, that we get the support from. So now, before we enter the question period, we want to say a few more words about the NCCR, actually, not in terms of the research content, not in terms of the structure support, But we want to highlight a fact that sometimes gets neglected with NCCRs, and that is that NCCRs really are much more than just research enterprises, and that's a very fundamental aspects of them, actually. And so there is a huge infrastructure out there, NCCRs, that, for instance, push fair data sharing. We have training programs, winter schools, summer schools, data science support, ethics, consultation and advice. We have a scheme of internal grants, and we have a lot of outreach activities that really, really are important for us. And just to give some examples of what we have done in the past, it's just a selection of outreach events we have, and it's very important for us to connect with the broader public, right? It's not like an ivory tower style of research that we are doing, because, as I said, when we started, the basic observations that our whole enterprise is driven by are challenges for us, not just as scientists, but as human beings. And we want to carry this back into society because we feel it's important to recognize these challenges and to discuss them at length. So in this all these science events, Le Nuit de la Science in Geneva, or Scientifica in Zurich, and similar events all over Switzerland. And along with this, we put a great emphasis on media outreach, both in the traditional media, in TV shows and newspapers and so forth, but also much really important, like in social media, especially like I think the most important these days is Instagram. That's where the show is happening, it seems. And so that our team is doing a wonderful effort in really pushing our ideas out there. And with this, I really would like to thank our management team, which is without which nothing would be possible, right? With Fabienne Fournichot and Émilie Wyss as the two heads, and the whole team here on the slide. So thanks a lot to you all for this great support. And now, really at the very end, just a peek into the future, because NCCRs aren't some of the home institution representatives mentioned it. NCCRs don't end with the funding. That's another very important aspect of this, which is different from similar funding schemes in other countries. NCCRs don't end when the funding runs out. Our funding runs out in 2032. But it doesn't end there, because we have long-term plans, and the long-term plans is actually to move from the Isle, which is a little island, right, to the big Nile River, that is the National Center for the Interdisciplinary Study of Language Evolution. And it's in sight already, and it will be, well, a river network where hopefully collaboration and work flows just the way it flows now between different institutions in Switzerland, with Zurich, Neuchâtel, and Geneva as the three core pillars, but obviously many other institutions all over Switzerland participating. And it's in fact a growing number, because I'm sure we'll have a denser network even in 8 years. And so with this, I would like to end. I will put up the slide again with the research program that I mentioned at the beginning, just as like a prompt maybe for questions and discussions. But I really would like to thank everybody, and especially the home institution representatives, for participating in this event. And so, yes, the floor is open for discussion. You know, we do this as a three location show, so to speak. And so now we have the discussions just locally within Zurich and within Geneva and within Neuchâtel. And with this, I say goodbye to my colleagues in Geneva and Neuchâtel. We don't see them, so this is like Eurovision Song Contest. So goodbye and thanks for participating. All right, bye.
So thank you everyone for listening. We have a bit of time for Q&A. The Q&A is